Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Mike Pelaia.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast presented by NFL Photo Store, the official photo store of the National Football League. I am your host, Joe Kuzma, and today, finally hooking up with a voice you've heard here, usually in the middle of the week. Disappeared on the short week now, but I have found him, Mike Pelaia from Steel Nation Association. Mike, what's going on?
Oh, not a whole lot, and a whole lot at the same time after the last couple of games, right? Happy to join you finally. I know we've talked about this several times, and we're 10 games in, we finally do it. It's good to finally do this.
Yeah, I know. Last year we had like a round table. I'd had Jeff Hartman, who's with Behind the Steel Curtain, and Neil Coulong, who I think Neil may have still been doing something with Steelers Wire, but he floats around so much. He's doing stuff with USA Today Sports and their NFL properties. And I've even talked with Neil about coming back on here, and I still haven't connected with Neil anytime soon. And it's funny because even myself and Neil were even he went to a rival university of mine, small colleges, and we were talking a lot when they faced each other recently about a month ago. And, it's just one of those things where we're all flying around with our heads cut off, and even more so heading into the upcoming Thanksgiving weekend. So just to I'm going to give the programming reminder again because I know we have a lot of returning listeners, but if you float around and you pick and you're selective with which shows you listen to, I understand you only want to hear me. You don't want to hear Brian. So Brian's not here. So this is the prime episode to get your information. And what I'll tell you is that I don't know exactly what we're going to do with Thanksgiving and Black Friday. We may have something that comes out there, but I think most of our programming is going to be out the beginning part of the week with, of course, this episode, which is Monday, and then, of course, tomorrow, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then after that, it's kind of a crapshoot. Mike, I know you might record something solo on your own, too, and then you never know what Brian's going to do because he's wild-eyed and crazy old man over there, and but, speaking of crazy, you had something that went up on not only your website, but you contribute here with Steel City Underground. And so this article went out and you caused a little bit of a tizzy among Steelers Nation. It went out right after the Colts game, right smack in the middle on Tuesday, so right before they blew out the Titans at home. And you had asked, how good are the Steelers? And, of course, that is our topic of discussion today as well. But for all of the Steel Nation Radio, I believe, is how you present this over on Steel Nation Association. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, yep, so for all of those listeners, I didn't want to forget about Total Sports Enterprises either. They're also a partner of ours here with Steel City Underground, and they have a major Steelers signing that's coming up. If you're going to be in the area for the Baltimore Ravens game, the Sunday Night Football game, that day before on that Saturday afternoon, a slate of running backs headlined by Franco Harris will be signing autographs over at the mall at Robinson. It's just outside, maybe 15, 20 minutes with traffic outside of downtown Pittsburgh. So if you're staying in the area and you want to meet some Steelers legends, I recommend taking a look at tseshop.com for tickets. Each of the individuals, I think there's Barry Foster, Willie Parker, Frenchie Fuqua. I may be forgetting one other that'll be in attendance there. So you'll get to meet them, and you could pretty much get anything you want signed. I think the craziest one, we spoke with someone, I forgot who we interviewed. May have been, I don't know if it was LT Walton, because LT, everything I asked him, one of my favorite players at the end of the year last year as he was filling in, and I like all the underdog guys, LT backup lineman, and his answer to everything was he was focused on winning championships, which almost sounded a little bit, we joked internally, as I am Groot. But I love LT, and I think it was LT or it may have been someone else that said they signed a fidget spinner. It was the oddest thing that they had ever autographed. So if you're into that and you want a fidget spinner autographed, you go right for it. So I know you enjoy these things too, Mike. The guys at TSC are a class act.
Absolutely. I mean, you really can't get a better option of athletes that they provide specifically. If you're a Steeler fan or a Pittsburgh fan in general, it's not just Steelers. They certainly cover the Penguins and Pirates as well. And I know they're branching out to some other teams now as they get a little bit bigger. But the venue's fantastic. The guys are great. You're going to have a good time. You're going to meet some of your favorite, in this case, running backs from the Steelers. But they do this every few weeks, every month. They're bringing you new opportunities to meet these guys. And to your point, Joe, it's a great event every single time.
Yeah, their schedule's a little erratic like ours right now because of all the primetime games and Thursdays and Mondays and everything that's out of whack. And myself and Brian spoke to that a little bit on the last show, and we're going to talk about it a little bit here because when you had asked how good are the Steelers, we're looking at maybe 7-2, now 8-2, and I don't know. You said it didn't feel like a 7-2 team, and this was great because I think on some of the social media comments, I even said, hey, I agreed with some of this. I was in the middle on some of this, and then there was a few things that I disagreed with. I think a lot of people sympathized with the fact that 7-2 and then now 8-2, maybe after a big game with the Titans, we're starting to see them turn the corner, but I hated calling it bipolar because I know it's an actual condition, but I don't know what else to say. Gemini, two-faced, flip of a coin. The team seems to have different personalities at different times. There's always the feeling that they play down to, quote, inferior opponents, though I think that's really limited as to who's really inferior in the NFL any given Sunday. But the Steelers seem to be kind of searching for themselves all season long. We've seen Ben's best games pretty much. He had a few good ones at home. Doesn't seem to always be a very solid road quarterback. And the team itself, it's hard to win on the road in the NFL. How much do you chalk up maybe some of, you want to say, the irregularities to just playing so many, having a schedule front-loaded with not only maybe more quality defenses, but playing those teams on the road?
You're right. There's something to that. Obviously, no matter where you go, up to and including Cleveland, it's hard to win on the road. And the Steelers obviously did so this year in that first game. But even in that first game, I didn't feel extremely impressed with the way they performed. Now, some of that's my expectation because they're playing the Browns. Some of that's because I expected them right out of the gates to score 30 or even 40 points against just about every opponent they faced. Yeah, I mean, if you listen to the coaches talk, to Roethlisberger talk, to anybody talk on that team, they'll tell you, and they're rightfully so, that it's harder to hear. They can't necessarily do some of the no-huddle stuff that they like to do as they did against the Titans this Thursday. So there's certain difficulties that come along with playing on the road, and I absolutely would never discount that. And, that has to be taken into consideration. I think that some of this is they're held to a certain expectation in my eyes because they have so much talent on that roster. This is a Super Bowl roster. There is no question about that. I wrote earlier this year on both of our sites, and again, actually at the midpoint, that I still expect them to win the Super Bowl, despite my how good are they. I have written that. Now, my last proclamation was that they felt like a one-and-done team because, to me, they're just not doing the things against these inferior teams that I expect them to do, whether they're on the road or at home. And that scares me a little bit when you're talking about teams in particular like the Patriots, where if we're blessed enough for them to get to the Super Bowl, that I think the Eagles are probably the team that they would face. I don't know that they have the right quality to advance in those games.
It's an interesting take, and it's because you keep seeing them inch forward year after year after year. Now, I think so long as they remain healthy, they have all of the talent that you speak of. I think that's been part of the thorn in their side over the last few seasons. Of course, when they lost at home to the Ravens in the wild card game, no Le'Veon Bell. They couldn't generate anything. They bring in Ben Tate. They actually start Ben Tate because, who was the kid that they had? He was a practice squad guy that came in late because of LeGarrette Blount getting tossed off the team. Josh Harris, was that his name? I think.
Yeah, I believe it was. Yes.
And Josh Harris wasn't ready, and they lost Bell in basically the last game of the year. and they had no time to prepare and bring Ben Tate up to speed. And Ben Tate he was a big free agent coming off the Texans in that offseason, goes to the Browns. Browns cut him, goes to like Minnesota or something. I think that's when Adrian Peterson blew out his knee, and he wasn't very strong there. Got released by the Vikings because the Vikings weren't advancing to the postseason. And what happens is you make some of those roster moves right within that week. They pick up Ben Tate, and he was more or less involved in two of the turnovers that cost them. One was a fumble or a missed block or something with Terrell Suggs was just eating him alive, and it cost them that game. And you know, you're not really trying to make excuses here, but it is what it is in some cases. Ben Tate was not Le'Veon Bell, nor was Josh Harris. A year later, when they play the Denver Broncos, they're in that game, and Fitz Toussaint fumbles the football. Again, it's not Le'Veon Bell, and they didn't have D'Angelo Williams either. And you go into that game as well. They lose Antonio Brown also to the whole concussion thing with that ugly game with the Cincinnati Bengals and whatnot. So when you go back to last season and you see how they handled the Dolphins with a healthy team, and you know, it was a tough game. They had to go on the road to Kansas City, but they got it done, even though it was all Chris Boswell. But Bell still ran for a ton of yards and had a lot of production in that game. They go up to New England, and he touches the ball 5 times and is out before the end of the first quarter with that groin injury. And I think that contributed somewhat. Also, we said Ben playing on the road, not as sharp, turnovers. I think they were still in that game through halftime. Now, I want to say, everyone's always talking about, I called them the elephant in the room. And I think it's because they have the consistency of, they get a bye. I say they play in a cupcake division. This reminds me of Bill Cowher beating up on the teams in the division back in the day. Like the Bengals were always bad. The Browns were actually maybe a little bit better at some point. And then you had an expansion Jacksonville team at one point before they made all the realignment and whatnot. And, you know, those teams always used to end up, Cowher's teams used to get a bye. And the Patriots are in the same type of position where they beat up on their division. They pick up 5-6 wins automatically right there, and they're on their way. And the Steelers haven't had that luxury maybe until this year, because as you pointed out, on their schedule still, they still have to play the Ravens, the Bengals, and the Browns, but they're all sub-500 teams this year. So what I'm getting at is that the Steelers are in more of the driver's seat now, because I think this is a weaker New England Patriots team than what we've seen. And even though they're weaker, they still play in a pretty lame division where they can maintain a lead and keep pace here for a bye as far as the AFC and as far as who gets home field advantage.
There's no question, you know, and I fully expect the Steelers, as they sit 8-2 here on this Monday, to advance to a no worse than 12-4 record. You know, if you look at the remaining schedule, you know, you mentioned the division games. We have those 3. I would expect 3 wins there. However, that road game in Cincinnati on a Monday night could be a potential L. I'm giving them an L to the Patriots at home on December 17th, although I expect that to be a relatively competitive game. I just, given the history that the Steelers have with that organization, until I see Keith Butler and Mike Tomlin make the necessary adjustments to stop that spread offense in particular, I'm going to give them the L. And then I think there's one somewhere else that'll trip them up, whether it's at the Bengals. If Deshaun Watson were playing for the Texans, I might throw that Christmas Day game out there as the one, or maybe even the Ravens at home. It's still that bitter rivalry. But to your point, I definitely think the Steelers are headed in the right direction for that bye. The concerning part of this to me is, can they win that first game and then most likely have to play the Patriots, whether it's at home or I think it's going to be in New England, because I expect them to lose to New England. Can they advance past the Patriots this year? You're right. They've made a step every single year for the last few years to get to that next stop. And the next one this year is going to the Super Bowl. Originally, I had them losing this game to the Patriots in December, going to New England in January and winning. And I'd like to think that they can do that. And I think that they can do that. But to your point earlier, which team is going to show up? I don't know. A lot of times they're playing these, what I deem inferior opponents, and they are winning. And that's all that matters, correct? But it makes me think that when they play these dominant teams like the Patriots, and there's very few of them this year, quite honestly, can they do what it takes to advance? And I go back and forth.
Yeah, I don't know that the Patriots are completing some of my thought. I don't know that they're as dominant this year. And like you had mentioned, they are winning. The Steelers are winning the games. These are the games they used to drop, and it's a big deal. When you look around the league, you'd be surprised. I know everybody wants to blow out opponents like they did to Tennessee. That's not the norm. And a lot of games, you'll see statistics. I think the one year, maybe a few years ago with Andrew Luck and the Colts, I think they had like 10 games decided by 3 points or less. And you'll see stuff like that with that. They won that division and ended up in the postseason. So, but the Patriots this year, like I said, I don't think they're as strong. I think they're reeling a little bit. They've lost games at home. They've lost two of them, actually. They lost to the Panthers, who I don't think anybody would have considered that to even be a possibility, given the way Carolina was playing earlier this season. They lost the very first game of the year to the Kansas City Chiefs. One of the things here is that teams are going into New England, and they are beating that team. They're not if they're Goliath, they've shrunk a little bit than what haven't been as big in recent years. Now, they're still capable of putting up points. They had a shootout at home with the Houston Texans. They won by 3 points, right by the skin of their teeth, really, and just a miracle grab. I think it was Brandon Cooks, and then the Texans themselves couldn't finish out that game. I mean, it was like last-second type stuff. They beat up on the Saints down in New Orleans, and that was the last time the Saints had lost. They went on this huge win streak there, so the Saints are actually a quality team. I look at the rest of their schedule. If it wasn't for Tampa Bay down on a Thursday night down in Florida, missing, they've had field goal kicker problems for like 2 years. They got rid of the kid that they drafted in the second round. That Aguayo, and I forget the other one that they picked up, and he missed like 2-3 field goals or whatever. They left points on the board. The New York Jets, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, and that whole debacle with the replay and the fumble and the touchback thing that should have been a touchdown in New York. The Patriots squeak out of that game 7-point winners. There's a lot of close games here. And then they beat the Falcons 23-7 at home. They had a little bit of trouble with the Chargers 21-13, and then they had absolutely no problem going into Denver, a place that they had never had. They've always had problems winning there, I should say. Denver had never had a problem beating New England, but Denver isn't the same team that they have been in recent years. So I think the Patriots, I think there's a lot of hype to it, and I think some of that can be legacy feelings. It's like one of the things we said with Ben Roethlisberger. He hadn't been playing as sharp until he gets a home game finally, and he gets on fire. I think some of that it can also be attributed to the Patriots. What I'm really interested in seeing is if anybody in their division can actually beat them, because they have to play the Dolphins like 2 times within 3 weeks. They still have the Bills twice and the Jets once. So they have all division games left on the slate other than coming to the Steelers. Now, here's something that hasn't been considered. They come to Heinz Field on a short week because they play a Monday Night Football game in Miami, and then they have to come to Pittsburgh. It's their 3rd straight road game in a row. And I think last season, despite having Landry Jones, the Steelers were really in that game. They didn't have all of their components. They had some guys that were hurt, obviously Ben. I think the Steelers were in that game. I think there was a call or two, not to put it on referees, but also a play or two, decision either by officials or execution, that if it went the other way, I think the Steelers end up winning that game. There was a big swing in points right before the end of the half in that game, and that I know everybody knows that I'm a Landry Jones homer over here, but I thought that was like something where he proved, hey, I could come in here and do whatever. The Patriots defense isn't as strong this season as they were last season. So I know we're talking a lot about New England in reference to how good are the Steelers, but it seems like everybody places the Patriots up on a pedestal, And I'm not saying that they don't belong there. They've deserved to be spoken of in that way. I know a lot of Steelers fans it's probably the only team that if you lose to them, they find it acceptable, asterisks, unless it's the AFC Championship game, and then, fire all the coaches and gut the team and start over. I say that jokingly, but it seems like one of the teams that fans and everyone, they're okay with, if you're going to lose a game, it's the opposite of the inferior opponent. This is actually usually a quality coached team.
There's no question. And I think, there's a lot of information there that you put out, and it's all correct. I think the Patriots have taken a step back, maybe even two. Their defense is certainly not a superior defense. And the Steelers' offense, at least in theory, is a 40-point offense, which we saw this past week against the Titans. Now, if that's the offense that's going to show up, you don't have to score 40 points every time, but if we know that they're going to get close to 30 or be above 30, everything changes. And the Patriots are certainly susceptible of giving up that kind of points to an offense like the Steelers have. I guess when I look at the Patriots, the concern I have is I look at this in kind of a two-game set, because I'm working on the assumption that assuming the Steelers were to advance, they would ultimately face New England, because quite frankly, outside of the Steelers and the Patriots, Chiefs are pretty good too, but I don't feel like there's that really any competition to get to the AFC Championship game. The Chiefs may be that third best team in the AFC. But what I look at this as is the Steelers play the Patriots. We know that date, December 17th in Pittsburgh. Assuming, let's say they win. Let's say they beat the Patriots. They get home field advantage most likely throughout the playoffs if they do. The Patriots would most likely come back in January in that championship game. Do you trust the Steelers given the history that they have with the Patriots, also just the fact that Bill Belichick is arguably the best coach in the history of the game, one of, if you don't want to put him at the top. Can the Steelers beat that team twice in the same season? I just don't know that they can. I trust that Belichick would take from that loss, make all the adjustments, and come back and end up embarrassing the Steelers at home. And it gets a little old, because this Steelers team, if you want to go back the last 15 or so years, 17 years, there's a couple of Super Bowls that they probably lost because they couldn't get by New England. And we can go through some of the controversies. That's a different topic for a different day. But they didn't get by New England. And that's the only team I think that's ever really been in the way for them most of those seasons. And again, inferior. And while I do believe the Steelers can beat them, they have the talent. And I don't want my comments to be taken as I don't think that this team could do it, because I do. And as I've written multiple times, I think that they have a great chance to win number 7 this year. But I don't trust them to beat the Patriots twice. I just don't. I feel like Belichick would again, until Keith Butler and Mike Tomlin, as I mentioned earlier, prove that they know how to stop that spread offense 55 times with Brady and run it 4 times. I mean, he's capable of doing anything, and how he outmatches our coaches historically is what gives me a little fear with that team.
I could agree with that. I could also disagree with it. Yeah, Josh McDaniels is really – I think he's the one that doesn't get the credit, and Belichick and Brady get a ton of that credit, because you look at what Patriots teams were like with and without McDaniels, and there's like that little lapse of, where maybe the Patriots weren't – they also had some competition. It's unfair to say Peyton Manning getting on that Broncos team and putting that defense around Peyton like they did was also pretty big. But you know what? The Baltimore Ravens also gave the Patriots some fits too, and I don't find Joe Flacco to be any type of superior quarterback, nor do I ever think that their offense was really this awesome, like fear-inspiring type thing that the Patriots would have had to worry about. But I know we talk a lot about the Patriots, but like I said, it's how good are the Steelers, and this is the one that everyone's looking at. Not to overlook, the Texans don't have Deshaun Watson. The Packers don't have Aaron Rodgers, so those games on the schedule now maybe not as intimidating. You got your division games, which you could always split. I'm going to bring up some Cincinnati numbers here in a second, but your comment about not only beating them but also trusting. It's the Steelers defense, and we see they give up a big play or two to the Titans. We saw that actually work the complete opposite way with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who you give up a splash play here or there, but when you turn the ball over too, and you're making mistakes, and maybe there's a penalty and it stalls the drive and gives you second and third and long, and it forces you to change your game plan. It forces you to change your play calling. So when you're in a longer down and distance to go, or you're behind in the game, those are usually, and it causes problems for any team because you don't have that rhythm. But when you're in the driver's seat, like the Steelers were, jumping up to an early 10-0 start with the Titans, and you're playing at home, I think that's pretty big too. So I think we're going to be talking a lot about New England, but I think the thing, just to talk about whether or not they could beat them twice in a season, I think it's far more important that the Steelers win the game at home, the regular season game. That will definitely happen because we are speaking hypothetically, and as you mentioned, really the Chiefs are the other team in this equation, and they've already beat New England at home. So assuming it stays somewhat the way it is, and let's say the Steelers had home advantage, let's say the Patriots get a bye, and then the Patriots would end up hosting the Chiefs, and just all in theory. I mean, this is way down the road. It's still too early to talk about this, but it's got to be in the Patriots' psyche that they can lose at home to the Chiefs. Now, they could go and try and get revenge or whatever, but that's going to be a tough game. It's going to be mentally, physically, emotionally, everything there. That's going to be a tough game for them. And if they overcome that and then have to come to Pittsburgh, where, in theory, they've already lost just a month earlier, and it's a Steelers team that also had a rest, they didn't have to play an extra game now with a wild card or anything else. I think let's take this too. If you recall, the Steelers and Chiefs moved to a primetime game, and the Patriots played on Saturday afternoon, and the Steelers played on Sunday night. Also an advantage. If you put the shoe on the other foot and put New England in this situation and send them to Pittsburgh after they've already lost a game there, and maybe they had to fight off somebody and already had their revenge game. Do they have 2 revenge games in them? That type of stuff can really get in your head.
No question. And I mean, of course, if you're given the choice, if you got to pick what you wanted, you want the Steelers to take the number 1 seed. They beat the Patriots, they get the bye. And then they may or may not play the Patriots, assuming the Steelers advance, and then the Patriots would also have to advance, and then you get them at home for a chance to go to the Super Bowl. I'll take that all day, every day. There is no question that is the setup that everybody would like, and you would take your chances. And you know what? If you play the Patriots a second time and you lose at home, then good on the Patriots, right? But possibly, to your point, maybe the Chiefs beat the Patriots a second time, and now the Steelers have to beat the Chiefs a second time. And honestly, first of all, I want to again put this out there. The Steelers can beat anyone, anytime, anywhere. They can. And I want that to be known, that I fully believe that. And I think that this team has that roster. I just, as we've kind of said, how good are they? I'm still trying to feel that out as we're 10 games into the season. If we just take the last 2 games, you have the Colts game, which they won. And of course, the Titans game, which they won. Very different fashions, 1 home, 1 road. So it's who are they? 10 weeks in, 10 games in. Who are they? And we're talking down the line, the playoffs. Are they home, away, Patriots, Chiefs, etc.? I guess we'll get there when we get there. Can they do it? Yes. Can they easily lose in that first game of the playoffs too? Right now, based on a who are they scenario, yeah, I think they could. It's just who's going to show up. We know what they're capable of on that. There is no ceiling for this team in a lot of ways, but we've also seen the floor. That Bears game in particular, now that's weeks ago at this point, and they got blown out at home to the Jags. I think there's a lot of issues there with Roethlisberger had 5 picks. That's not going to happen again. I'm willing to go out there and say that. The Jags are certainly better than we all thought they were at that point. I don't think that they're a great team. They very well may be a playoff team. You wouldn't expect the Steelers to lose that home game by 21 points, but the loss to the Jags doesn't feel as bad today as they sit here with a winning record. The Jags I'm talking about, as it did then. But you also look at like a Blake Bortles, he's not, to me, he's certainly not a Super Bowl quarterback. I don't even see him as a playoff quarterback. That defense, and then Fournette when he's healthy, that'll get them there. It's sort of the old Ravens philosophy, I suppose. But it's just the feel of this team is so bizarre, because if we recorded this before the Titans game, I might be far more negative as I am today. I feel like I saw what I've been waiting for. I saw exactly what I've been waiting for. I knew that they were capable of it. So begs the question, who are they?
Yeah.
Who are they?
And exactly, not only waiting for it, but you didn't expect it on a short week with no rest. But I also said it was like they got tuned up at the end of that Colts game, and there's a little bit of momentum as opposed to taking a nap and being groggy when you wake up, which is what I mostly fear playing a Packers team at home for another primetime game. So, but before I get into the division opponents, they pretty much owned most of them. I want to talk about how you could own your photos of top plays and favorite players. So, folks, if you're interested, you could visit steelers.photos.nfl.com. You can also Google search this if you just look up NFL Photo Store, because you may be purchasing for maybe some fans that aren't with the Steelers, you know what I mean? And we got those people in our family. My wife's a Browns fan, as everyone knows. It's been a long-time listener here. So, but there aren't any photos I'd buy of any players there. There's nobody worthy of that. It wouldn't stay on the wall for very long. But this is the official photo store of the NFL, the official online photo store, I should say, where you find the largest selection of premium quality photo, canvas, and metal prints, and new photos are added every week. If you are interested in receiving 25% off of one of your purchases, you could use the code SteelCity at checkout. Once again, that's the official NFL photo store. And you could look for Steelers photos specifically at steelers.photos.nfl.com. That's a lot of dots. I also see, as I'm looking, I don't even have to go back really with the Browns. We know there's a lot of W's there. We know the Ravens always play the Steelers pretty tough. Doesn't matter if it's home or away. Usually when they play at Baltimore, where they've won this year, in another game that wasn't exactly pretty, they were able to get it done finally. That's usually their bugaboo. I think they'll be okay at home. The one I wanted to talk about was the Bengals, because it was interesting when I heard you say, well, maybe that other game could be the Bengals. And it's like, the Bengals are another team that's like loaded with talent that seems to be incredibly underachieving. I think part of that is because they just totally neglected their offensive line. I think part of their windows closing, the defense is getting, as Warren Sapp used to say about the Steelers about 5-6 years ago, long in the tooth. Now, the Steelers have won 5 straight games against the Bengals. They haven't lost to Cincinnati since a home game back on November 1st of 2015. And if you want to go back even further, they have won, let's see, 3. So you've got 8 of their last 9 games the Steelers have won against the Bengals. You have to go all the way back for back-to-back losses back, and these aren't even in consecutive. They're in different seasons. So December 23rd, 2012, at home, 13-10. What an ugly game that was. I remember very well. And then September 16th, 2013, a 20-10 loss down in Cincinnati. And then even before that, they had won 5 in a row heading into those back-to-back losses. So for most of the decade, they've only lost to the Bengals 3 times this decade, going back to starting with November 8th, 2010. They literally... this is, people don't think of it in the same aspect because you think the Cleveland Browns, you think inferior team, all the comments that we said earlier in this program, but they've owned the Bengals as much as the Browns.
Roethlisberger owns Ohio. They always say it.
Yeah.
He's the governor. It's, I don't think we think of it that way because the Browns are the Browns and we know that. But with the Bengals, even in those wins, a lot of them have been, kind of down to the wire, close. Certainly, it's not to say the Steelers haven't blown them out in a couple of those, but the Bengals have been more competitive. Let's put it that way. So they always have the feel of this is a potential game that we could lose. Where the Browns, when we enter those games, I don't think that any Steeler fan ever feels that they're going to lose that game. But the Bengals at home, they have a talented roster, as you said. They're not playing very well this season. A Monday night home game, that could be the Bengals' playoff game. It could disrupt the Steelers' season in a way that they may not get that number one seed. Maybe they don't get a bye. There might be something there for the Bengals to play for to motivate them. They certainly have talented guys on the roster. AJ Green is the number one guy that comes to my mind when I think of the Bengals. Andy Dalton is no Roethlisberger. He's no Brady. He's not a superstar, but he's capable at times of making plays. Well, all you have to do is get the ball to AJ Green, really, because that guy is the guy that's making the plays. But, I think Dalton is a mid-level quarterback that could go either way. But they get pumped up for the Steelers. Let's put it that way. Earlier we were talking about the Patriots, and that's the team. That's the team. Well, for the Bengals, win the division historically over the last decade or more, you had to go through Pittsburgh. So that was their number one up for. And I think that could carry into that Monday. The Steelers are far superior, in my opinion. But as I mentioned, I expect 2 more losses potentially down the stretch to finish 12. I circle on the calendar as one that could be that surprise loss.
And I just wanted to point out, too, before we wrap here, since we're up against it, Andy Dalton, traditionally, primetime games, Monday nights, Thursday nights, Sunday nights, not good. I wish I had the stats in front of me, but he's been atrocious. He is literally, you want to take the Ben Roethlisberger away game stats, and I know that they're very bad, but unfortunately, looking up here in the game log, I can't easily pick out which one of these were the primetime games. Unfortunately, it just has the dates, so I didn't have that prepared, but you just jogged my memory of it, because I want to say, like, last year he had a game recently. No, maybe it wasn't this one. Maybe it wasn't last year, but the year before, where he threw like 3 or 4 interceptions in a primetime game, or he was just really bad, just really bad. So that could also be the antithesis there. And of course, when the Steelers played that wild card game, don't forget they didn't have Andy Dalton. They had AJ McCarron stepping in because Dalton was he was hurt, concussion protocol, something like that. So Mike, why don't we tell everyone once again how they could follow you on Twitter? I always forget your handle because it's like ours, it's abbreviated.
It's definitely, I appreciate that. You can follow me at Steel Nation ASSC. So it's abbreviated for Steel Nation Association. Steel Nation ASSC on Twitter. And of course, you can visit steelnationassociation.com if you want to get some materials from my writing or join our club that helps Children's Hospital.
Yep, always a great thing you do there with the children's hospitals. Until next time, folks, enjoy as we move forward. We may say hello one more time before Turkey Day. If not, enjoy your turkey. And we'll try and get maybe one more preview in here and actually speak about the Packers. And so this was almost like a Patriots review here. But I think there's a lot of optimism going forward for this season. So until next time, be safe, be good. We'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.